Sort of aligns with the, fighting fire with water, not fire. You don't go after a fire and just send more fire at it. It doesn't diffuse the situation. It doesn't calm things down and usually doesn't present solutions. The solutions come from the cooler head.
How can AI simultaneously drive growth in the data center industry while forcing traditional tenants to rethink their long-term strategies? Welcome to the Care to Lead podcast. I'm your host, Cynthia Corsetti. Today's guest is John Bonchek, Chief Revenue Officer of 1547 Critical Systems Realty. John is a respected leader known for his expertise in sales and business strategy. John, thank you so much for being here. We're glad to have you.
Cynthia, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So let's start by diving into AI's impact. You mentioned in your article that AI is not just transforming the data center industry, but it's pushing the limits of capacity, speed, data storage, leading to the creation of much larger facilities with higher power density. Could you elaborate on how these shifts are changing the competitive landscape for traditional tenants and what challenges that poses?
Yeah, absolutely. I think AI in general is creating a lot of opportunity, and that's opportunity for customers to deliver services that give end users just a greater access to capacity for data creation, compute, learning. What that's doing, along with the technology advances in the equipment that's being used, the GPUs in particular by companies like NVIDIA, it is creating the need for large data center build outs, consumption of the existing inventory. So what we're seeing as a result are these massive data center, call them campuses. Some may look like more single site, but we're measuring the hyperscale and AI data centers no longer in terms of megawatts, but in gigawatts, at least hundreds of megawatts. So you're seeing hundreds of thousands of square feet, hundreds of acres in terms of size of property being developed into these massive data center footprints. And what that's also driving is it's changing the demand and forecasting and planning for the traditional data center users. Let's call them the enterprises. I'd say they're these days made up primarily of financial and healthcare enterprises. The ones that would typically be looking for multiple megawatts, a megawatt to 5-10 megawatt. They're now planning further out in the future because of the consumption of data centers by AI companies. But also their technology stack is changing as well because of the availability of this type of compute, which they're incorporating into their environment. And whether you call it machine learning or AI, we're starting to see those requirements come down from the traditional enterprises in terms of the size of footprint that they're looking for and power density. Power density is a big change that we're seeing in this space, where we were seeing prior to a year ago, the average large density or high density footprint using cabinets that would consume somewhere around 17 kW on average per cabinet. And now we're seeing that jump up to 100 plus, 100 to 200 is what we're seeing forecasted. So that's what the large data center footprints are going to be built out for the large AI and hyperscale AI applications. They're going to be built out for that type of high density. And even in the edge co-location facilities for the traditional enterprises, we're seeing densities in that window, that 100 to 200 kW, where we're going to have to adapt and start building out for that type of footprint.
So in the article, you also talked about data gravity. And I'd like you to expand on that and tell me how that fits into all of this.
Yeah, so it really fits into what we're doing in terms of the edge facilities and carrier hotels that we own and operate. All of these AI footprints and hyperscale footprints that we're talking about, and these massive data centers, massive campuses, what they're enabling is just more data creation, more data consumption, more compute capacity. And that's all data. It's all data that needs to move, whatever the application is. So the gravity part is, pushing the pieces of those applications that are, the network elements and, the stuff that's being consumed by the end users, the eyeballs, us, with need to be out closer to the edge facilities. And by edge facilities, I mean, the facilities that are in the heavily populated environments, the carrier hotels, which, pre-existed all of this, where, the networks all converge to get that transport to and through and out to the end users. All of that data needs to be pushed out. There are a lot of applications that don't have very latency sensitive requirements, but what we're going to start to see more and more is the inference applications that are going to drive more of that data gravity with requirements to be by the edge. Whether it's, healthcare, diagnostics, monitoring, patient monitoring, autonomous vehicles, things like fraud detection. I mean, it's amazing. I just had an issue last night. I was trying to buy a whole bunch of tickets to a sporting event, and my credit card company instantly sent me a text to verify. I mean, the type of learning that they have to do and the response time is critical for those applications to work. So we're going to see more and more of that AI pushed out to the edge. Some of the questions that remain are, what kind of power densities are we going to need to see in those edge environments? Are they going to look like those 200 kW GPU stacks that need to sit in the carrier hotel? Or, will it just be some version, some edge application that's primarily network that needs to sit there? Regardless, that type of data needs to move. It needs to move quickly. And, these edge facilities or carrier hotels are well set up to do that, provided that they can produce the space and power required for that data to get there and move through.
So how does this affect your strategy for expansion into urban markets, and what role does adaptive reuse play in addressing these needs?
It really lends to it. I like the adaptive reuse topic because, for us in what we do with carrier hotels, it's almost not a choice. It really isn't a choice to adapt and reuse an existing building. I often talk about carrier hotels because carrier hotels, they really weren't planned. They just happened. And every market will have one. Some of the most familiar ones are like the 60 Hudson Street in New York City. That building became a carrier hotel because of its proximity to the AT&T network, their requirement to have to give competitive carriers access to their network, but not access to physical space. And New York being among the most populated cities in the world, the need to move content and traffic through that city just resulted in 60 Hudson being one of the most, if not the most known carrier hotel in the world. Now, if you go to any tier 2 or tier 3 market, they're all going to have a building that looks like that in terms of the carriers all sitting in the same facility, connecting to each other and moving traffic through. We have examples in our portfolio like the Chase Tower in McAllen, Texas, the Union Station building in South Bend, or the Wells building in Milwaukee. We acquired these buildings because they are already serving as the carrier hotels for those markets. And our thesis is that these buildings are going to become more and more important because of data gravity. Because the networks already run through those facilities, the major carriers with fiber, like your Lumens and Zaos and Crown Castles and AT&Ts, all have fiber moving to and through these buildings and connecting to each other. They're well set up to support the hyperscale and AI developments that are happening in the suburbs of those markets.
So this is all just built into the strategy.
It does. Yeah. It lends very well to it. And, we can spin the story a bit, if you will, and not really spin, but the adaptive reuse is we get to check some of those boxes with some of these facilities. I love, if you want to look at our building in Milwaukee, the Wells building, it is a beautiful historic building with just unbelievably gorgeous architecture that we like to preserve. It's the social impact of keeping the look and feel of that building and the historic nature of it. And anybody who walks into the lobby can appreciate all the marble and the ornate staircases and just artwork. But behind it, what we're doing is developing proper data center footprint and what is already serving as a carrier hotel for the market. So we're anticipating the applications coming in for this edge AI network requirement, so we can support the higher power densities that carrier hotels traditionally provide. So again, we get to preserve the cultural and historical heritage of the building by keeping most of the outward appearance the same, There is a sustainability story to that because clearly you're not wasting the building. You're not knocking it down. And in some markets like Milwaukee, the office occupancy is down a bit. And a lot of that is still repercussions from COVID. And we're able to use the building to serve a higher purpose, in my opinion, and be that important interconnection hub for the developments that are happening. Well, there are billions of dollars being spent in suburban Wisconsin that will tether through Milwaukee that we are very well set up to support the transport needs of.
So that's interesting. And if I'm correct, your team is also focusing on building out facilities in smaller markets like South Bend. Could you tell us more about why South Bend was chosen as a location and what makes it uniquely suited for your AI-focused operations?
Yeah, I mean, South Bend isn't all about the fighting Irish, right? That's sort of what people think of.
I think of Mayor Pete. As soon as I hear South Bend, I'm going, go Mayor Pete, I love him.
Well, I mean, all fair things to think of when you think of South Bend. But when we, first of all, there's the building that we acquired there is a Union Station building. And Union Station, because it literally was a train station. And the reason that the previous owner of the building had the foresight and recognition of the fact that it sat along the fiber routes, the major east-west fiber routes. Naturally, they sit along railroads because of the rights of way. Easy for long-haul fiber to be built along railroads. Previous owners of the building created a significant interconnection hub for those east-west fiber routes and ended up serving a lot of the enterprises in the metro area with access to a network-dense facility to co-locate their applications. And we are seeing significant development. I mean, it's no secret that Amazon is investing over $11 billion in Indiana for the development of their major data center campus. And I think it's even north of that. And data gravity is something where you see others will follow, right? If it's good enough for Amazon, it's going to be good enough for others. So there's buzz about some other major data center campuses being developed in that area. And again, to the earlier part of the conversation, that is creating more content, that is creating more compute, creating more data, and it will push that inference application out into the edge, and the edge being as close as you can get to these carrier hotels. So our plan for that facility, and when we acquire a building like that, we want to be assured that we have the ability to get additional power and build out additional space. So we have plans for all that to deliver several megawatts of additional space and power into that building, so we can then accommodate those applications that are going to come in and support that AI data.
So from a leadership standpoint, how do you keep your team motivated and ahead of all these things that are changing so rapidly and to keep them on task?
For me specifically, the team is the marketing and sales team. It starts with hiring the right people who understand this and thrive in an environment where we're working with the companies that are driving all of this in the background. And of course, there's an easy way to motivate salespeople, right? That's by paying them the right amount of money to bring in the right amount of business. But also there's the development and construction side. And these guys thrive on challenges like creating data center space in urban environments. They're also challenged now with the task of learning what the new latest and greatest in technology for providing that power distribution and cooling is. And, frankly, the AI applications are really driving us to need to be on the forefront of all of that. So it's not too difficult to keep these folks motivated. We have an acquisition team. The acquisition team is always looking at these next best opportunities to grow this company. So it's, really it's an exciting space to be in, and we're giving them a lot to chew on.
So working with people that are already in this industry and already motivated is great. But what would you say is an important characteristic that, not a skill, but a characteristic that a person should have to be really highly successful in your organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's one that I often talk about as being the things that don't show up on a resume, right? Mm-hmm. We pride ourselves on culture here, being a fit. We are very much like a family, our company, and I'm working with people that I worked with in previous lives. We always kind of joke it's like getting the band back together. That's a hokey phrase, but we use it because we bring the best of breed folks that we know work very well with each other back into this company where we know they're self-starters. Again, sounds very typical to say something like that, but I have a team of people who I don't need to give much direction to. You talk about thought leadership, right? I could take a thought and share it with my marketing team and they turn it into reality. And I know I have the right people that do that. And they'll do it better than I could myself. Somehow they take my thoughts and they turn it into something even better than I thought I was thinking, if that makes any kind of sense. It's really having the right people who have the right attitude towards this and thrive in the space that they're in and really, thrive at their position. My marketing team is just, they're so good at what they do and being able to take those ideas. My sales team, they're the right people for this type of space. They understand. They all come from not just co-location and data center, but network, and they understand the intricacies and the importance of these edge carrier hotel facilities that I can't just hire somebody else and put them in the same position without them. It would take years for them to gain the kind of knowledge and knowing people out there, knowing the network of people that we deal with to get the job done as effectively as we do.
I think you hit on something really key. I don't often think that people always consider the network of people. That's why one of the things for me, when I'm looking at executive hires or I'm helping consult on an executive hire, I always look at their LinkedIn profile. Not because I care about their profile, but I want to see how connected they are, how interactive they are, because it's one platform. And if they can't even be, it's the largest business platform out there. And yes, you can go to trade shows, you could do a lot of things, but if you're not even doing something daily to stay active on this massive profile or this massive platform, I think that there's something wrong with that.
I couldn't agree more. Now, there could be the flip side where somebody abuses LinkedIn and they're connected to more people than, I think we all probably have connections on our LinkedIn that they're people that we know of and maybe don't have a great relationship with, but it is a great indicator of what somebody's network looks like. And it's not hard to validate if we're talking about hiring somebody. And typically, I'm probably not hiring somebody that I don't already know well, or I know somebody who knows them well. So it's very easy to validate what somebody is pitching to us in terms of their network. And then when we do go to trade shows and all these industry events. There's a lot of them these days, kind of too many. I was just at one last week in Vegas and there was another one going on last week in Austin. And when I see my guys walk around these events and they can't get 20 feet without running into 5 people, they become sort of reunions. That's validation that we have the right people in place. And look, it's not just knowing people, but it's having their respect and, the relationship where you could pick up the phone and make a call. That's very meaningful in our world today, because to me, if it's the right relationship, that means there's trust. Business is ultimately business, but if you have a personal relationship with somebody that could trust what you're saying, that goes a very long way in any business, but in particular in this industry. It's a big industry, but it gets smaller and smaller when you look at who the key players are.
John, what would you consider your proudest professional achievement, and what lessons did it teach you about leadership?
Oh boy, it might seem like the easiest answer, but it's having successful people on my team. I've had the fortune of hiring folks in my career that came in without much experience, but maybe to a point that you're making earlier, it's sort of the intangibles that don't show up on the resume. You hire the right people who are going to be the right cultural fit and they're going to work as a team. And I really think creating a team environment among my team, which is a kind of a challenging thing to do when it comes to a sales organization. But when I hear my sales guys talking about how they're sharing information with each other and not hoarding it, because they know what's good for their peers is good for them ultimately, because we do work in a business of ecosystem, it makes me very proud to know I brought in the right people. And one of the things I've always said is my success is determined by surrounding myself with good people. And I like to hire people to do a job better than I can do it myself. And I think I've succeeded at doing that. And that's probably what I'm most proud of. I love looking at my team, not only enjoying what they do, but thriving at it and being very successful. Sometimes there's a painful thing where somebody on my team ends up getting offered a big position at another company because they've grown so much, and I can't be upset about that. Just seeing the success that I've been able to build and people on my team just growing in their careers and their success, both professionally and personally, that's what makes me most proud.
That is a lot to be proud of. As an executive leadership coach, I coach C-suite executives across the globe, and I've done this since 2011. So one of the things that I've learned is that most learning for CEOs comes from struggles, from failures. So it's easy to talk about how we have great teams and we have this open door and we all communicate and it's all great. But if we're honest with ourselves, there's always a struggle. So let me ask you to share with our listeners, what's something that you struggle with in your leadership today?
Oh boy, I struggle with today. I mean, some of the struggles that I've had over the years are retaining those good people through lean times, especially in a startup environment, which, it wasn't that long ago that 1547 was a startup. Hiring the quality people that I want to have on my team and giving them the roadmap that they need to be successful and asking them to have that faith in me and the company that we were going to get there at some point. That's probably the hardest thing, is the retention in general, but retention of somebody who can be successful but might not be achieving it at the moment.
Okay. So you mentioned that cooler heads prevail is a life mantra for you. Would you like to share how this mindset's helped you?
Oh, in many occasions. I think I had one last week that, the whole reason that cooler heads prevails is, details that I won't share about the situation, but the general meaning behind that is, the knee-jerk reaction to an email that you see, and how many times I've typed up a response that I was about to hit send on before realizing this is just a knee-jerk reaction. Let me sleep on this and let me see what my response would be tomorrow. It's not letting emotion and anger get in the way of a situation and a proper response, and often just combating a maybe harsh email, whether internally or externally. It sort of aligns with the, fighting fire with water, not fire. You don't go after a fire and just send more fire at it. It doesn't diffuse the situation. It doesn't calm things down, and usually doesn't present solutions. The solutions come from the cooler head.
I like that. So before we jump into the lightning round, I want to ask you if there's anything that you want our listeners to know about you or your company that we haven't already covered.
That we haven't covered, I'm not sure, because I just tend to go back to culture being paramount in any company. And I think that's what you'll find with 1547, talking with me or my team. If we have the opportunity to meet in person, you're going to learn that we are a collaborative group that love working with each other and really embrace discussions with our customers, tenants, and users. And I like to think of them all as partners, because it's truly a very symbiotic relationship we have with the tenants of our facilities, and their success is ours. So we're always looking to promote their business within and bringing our customers into our culture, and working very closely with them, making them feel like family.
It's interesting you say that, because I've experienced times when there's been panel interviews with people that were interviewing candidates, and you might have a candidate who is absolutely perfect. They interviewed well, they were great on paper, and they were just perfect. But at the end of the interview, the panel looks at each other and they're going, they're just not us. They just aren't our mojo. I don't want to get the vibe. And it's hard to explain, but it's really important in an organization.
Absolutely. 100% agree.
So, okay, let's jump into the quick lightning round.
Okay.
All right. Ready?
I think so.
What's the first thing you do every morning?
Have coffee.
Okay. What book has had the biggest impact on your career?
The Bible.
What is a skill that you're currently trying to master?
What skill am I currently trying to master? I don't know. That's a tough one. I know this is lightning, but am I trying to master something? If it's anything, it's being more collaborative with in personal and professional career. But I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for.
Favorite way to relax after a long day?
Hate to say it, but it's TV.
Have you binge watched anything lately?
Lately, I don't have a show that I'm binge watching. I'll just catch up on sports. But I've been known to binge. Some of my favorite binges have been Ted Lasso and Game of Thrones and Yellowstone. So I could binge. I could binge with the best of them if there's something that catches my attention. Yeah,
if you haven't watched Suits yet, that's a great binge. That's a great binge.
I haven't, and I've had a number of people tell me it's right up my alley. So I might have to get into Suits.
It's a great one. So if you could invite any 3 people to dinner, living or deceased, who would they be?
I mean, I have two easy ones, but those are easy ones, being the parents, right? But I probably Jesus would be up near the top of my list. I haven't given this a ton of thought. It's a good question. I could probably come up with some real good ones. I'd probably have to go to some of our founding fathers. Maybe Abraham Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln is up there. Benjamin Franklin, I think, would be a very interesting person to sit with. And I'd love to spend a little time with Einstein.
Interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So
that's more than three, but sorry.
That's okay. As we wrap up, my listeners who listen to my podcast already know that Care to Lead is my signature leadership system, and it's built on the foundation of 4 pillars. And that's what CARE stands for. It's clarity, authenticity, responsibility, and engagement. And I always ask my guests closing questions about one of those pillars. So, John, I'd like to ask you, which of those pillars resonates with you the most and why?
I think authenticity. To me, that makes me think about integrity, always being true to your word. It creates trust in others. And I don't think you can really develop much of a relationship with anybody, an employee, a customer, or anybody without having some level of, without pure authenticity, without being, perfectly honest and gain their trust. That's, to me, authenticity stands out. The others are very important.
It's interesting because 90% of the time that I ask that question, authenticity is the one that people say. And I'm always like, but responsibility, it starts within.
I like responsibility, but to me, authenticity is a big part of being responsible. They go hand in hand. You might not be able to have one without the other. How can you be a responsible person if you're not authentic?
Yeah, and I think also that when I formulated CARE, what I mean by responsibility is not necessarily just your responsibility word. It's like, I could be wrong. It's like, I'm going to not point fingers and all those things in organizations that are important. Yeah. And authenticity is very tightly correlated with that. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, I think it's okay to be wrong as long as you take the responsibility to own up to it.
Right. Exactly. And it's also a good way to get people if you're in leadership and you're high up and you come to a team and you say, okay, this is the way I want to move forward. And they're going to nod and they're going to say yes because of position power. But if you go to that same team and you say, okay, here's my idea. I put a lot of time into this and I'm thinking it through and I think it's going to work and I think it's the way forward. And for the next half hour, I want you to tell me why it won't work. That's going to get your team to open up. Yeah, that's going to get them to be honest.
I like it.
So is there anything else you want to say as we wrap up?
I mean, I think we covered a lot here, and I thought it was a healthy discussion. I don't tend to like to make things just a commercial for our company. This should be more of a healthy chat and leadership discussion. I think this was great.
So I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights. And it's been interesting and fun. And so thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Cynthia.
Oh, you're so welcome. And to all of our listeners, remember, leaders who care to lead. Thank you.